Folks, you want to really be infuriated. We covered in excruciating detail the siege laid upon Al-Shifa Hospital. I went to a Free Palestine rally in Troy, New York, near where I live, where a guy had 16 members of his family killed and several more in critical condition at this hospital. It was before they laid siege upon it. We've seen doctors killed. We've seen babies taken out of incubators because the power was cut off on their incubators and die as premature babies. And the justification for that, according to Israel, was that this was being used as a Hamas command center. Well, the radical far-left publication called The Washington Post did an investigation about this. The Washington Post writes the case of Al-Shifa investigating the assault on Gaza's largest hospital. Now, the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, this is a very authoritative source of information, so I'm sure they're going to let us know that actually Israel was right and that Hamas was using this as a command center. Let's take a look at what they have to say. Weeks before Israel sent troops into Al-Shifa Hospital, its spokesman began building a public case. The claims were remarkably specific, that 5 hospital buildings were directly involved in Hamas activities, that the buildings sat atop underground tunnels that were used by militants to direct rocket attacks and command fighters, and that the tunnels could be accessed from inside hospital wards. The assertions were backed by concrete evidence, quote unquote. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said as he laid out the case in an October 27th briefing. After storming the complex on November 15th, the IDF released a series of photographs and videos that it said proved its central point. Quote, terrorists came here to command their operations, Hagari said in a video published November 22nd, guiding viewers through an underground tunnel illuminating dark and empty rooms beneath Al-Shifa. But the evidence presented by the Israeli government falls short of showing that Hamas had been using the hospital as a command and control center, according to a Washington Post analysis of open source visuals, satellite imagery, and all of the public released IDF materials. That raises critical questions, yeah, I'd say so, legal and humanitarian experts say, about whether the civilian harm caused by Israel's military operations against the hospital, encircling, besieging, and ultimately raiding the facility and the tunnel beneath it, were proportionate to the assessed threat. The Post's analysis shows, bullet point number 1, the rooms connected to the tunnel network discovered by IDF troops show no immediate evidence of military use by Hamas. Bullet point 2. None of the 5 hospital buildings identified by Hagari appeared to be connected to the tunnel network. Wow, that's a pretty important one, I'd say. And bullet point 3, there is no evidence that the tunnels could be accessed from inside hospital wards. You had snipers positioned outside the hospital shooting everything that moved inside. You had doctors gunned down and killed inside a fucking hospital. And they're saying that there's no evidence, zero, that the tunnels that were under the hospital, many of which have been there since the 80s, Israel built a lot of those tunnels themselves, by the way, were accessible from inside the building, which means there was no justification whatsoever to be shooting people inside the hospital. We knew this from the outset. Now, some of the shitlibs know.
What about dead babies?
Of course.
I thought they were very concerned about dead babies, which from what I understand in the Israeli attack, this has gone from 40 beheaded babies to 1 actual deceased infant, not beheaded.
Right.
But we know that 4 babies in incubators died in this hospital.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Hours before IDF troops entered the complex, the Biden administration declassified U.S. intelligence assessments that it said bolsters Israel's claims. In the aftermath of the raid, Israeli and U.S. officials have stood firm behind their initial statements. We are absolutely confident in the intelligence that Hamas was using it as a command and control node, a senior administration official told the Washington Post last week, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive findings. Oh, speaking on the condition of anonymity because he's full of garbage. Hamas had been holding the hostages in the hospital compound until shortly before Israel went in. The U.S. government has not made any of the declassified material public, and the official would not share the intelligence this assessment was based on. Trust us. Trust us. When have we ever steered you wrong? The IDF
Would
has
we lie to
published...
you?
Exactly. The IDF has published extensive, irrefutable evidence that points to the abuse of the Shifa hospital complex by Hamas for terrorism purposes and underground terrorism activity, an IDF spokesperson told the Post. When asked if more evidence from Al-Shifa would be forthcoming, the spokesperson said, "We cannot provide additional information." On November 24th, Israel's military announced in a statement that it had destroyed the tunnel on the hospital grounds. Its forces withdrew soon after. "Before, I was convinced that Al-Shifa was where these operations were taking place," a senior U.S. member of Congress told the Post, speaking on the condition of anonymity. A congressman is now speaking on the condition of anonymity? Really? One of the cheerleaders for the raid who's now realizing, oh shit, it was all a crock of shit, and they actually murdered doctors and babies in a hospital for now what looks like, according to the Washington Post, reminder, okay, for no fucking reason at all. And they don't have the balls to come out and say who they are. Apologies if I'm talking about a woman, you know, whatever, whoever, he or her, have whatever it takes inside you to come out and come forward. But now he said, oh, okay, it's a he. Apology retracted. You don't have the balls to come forward and say who you are? I think there has to be a new level of demonstration. They should have more proof at this point. Yeah, you should come forward and say who you are if you were worth anything. Last slide here. But this is a long piece. I encourage everybody to read this
keep
full
getting
thing.
that sweet APAC money.
Exactly. The targeting by a U.S. ally of a compound housing hundreds of sick and dying patients and thousands of displaced people has no precedent in recent decades. The march on Al-Shifa caused the hospital's operations to collapse. As Israeli troops closed in and fighting intensified, fuel ran out, supplies could not enter, and ambulances were unable to collect casualties from the streets. Before troops entered the complex, doctors dug up a mass grave for as many as 180 people, the United Nations said, citing hospital staff. The morgue had long since ceased to function. Several days later, when WHO medics arrived to evacuate those still inside, they said the place of healing had become a, quote, death zone. At least 40 patients, including 4 premature babies, died in the days leading up to the raid and its aftermath, the United Nations said. In the weeks since, other hospitals in Gaza have come under attack in ways that mirror what happened at Al-Shifa, making the assault not just a watershed moment in the conflict, but a vital case study in Israel's adherence to the laws of war. So once again, folks, I just have to repeat, that's the Washington Post. That's one of the major papers of record doing their own investigation, finding no evidence of a command center at that hospital, which was the justification Israel, and by extension, the United States, gave to lay siege upon a hospital, to murder doctors, which is what they did, to murder babies, which is what they did. Under the guise of an anti-terrorism operation. And now you have one of the major papers of record here saying, we don't see compelling evidence to back that claim. That's a bombshell story. That's an absolute bombshell story. I'm surprised you're not seeing wall-to-wall coverage of that on TV. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm not surprised that you're not seeing wall-to-wall coverage of that on TV.
I will say the fact that this is in the Washington Post, the fact that the story we're about to show is on CNN, is, I hate to even use the word hopeful because of what the people in Palestine are suffering, but it's better than the alternative of just wall-to-wall pro-Israeli propaganda, which has been my experience throughout my life, what you would have gotten from the media in this circumstance. And I want to point out, I just saw a Zionist share a video of an ad they put up on the video screens in Times Square. This very kind of suggestive ad with a pair of bloody pants saying hundreds of women were raped. I mean, I've never even heard that. Hundreds of women. And Israel keeps trying to invoke whatever the number, that they're being ignored because Me Too doesn't apply in Israel and it's anti-Semitism. No, it's because of shit like this. Nobody trusts you. Nobody trusts you. When you come out and you talk about 40 beheaded babies and it turns out not to be the case, when it turns out that a lot of the people who died on October 7th died from your own forces friendly fire, when all of these things throughout the years, when you denying that you shot a journalist and then it comes out that you actually did target and shoot this journalist, nobody fucking trusts you. It's not that people don't care about sexual assault, and it's not that people don't care if that happened. It's that nobody believes anything that you say. This is what happens when you use the authority of your intelligence services to obscure realities which come out later, and you do that again and again and again and again. When you claim something that you clearly have a motive to lie about, nobody believes you until there's some kind of independent confirmation. It's not anti-Semitism. It's not people not caring about that crime. It's that nobody fucking trusts you, and you've earned that.
Exactly. It's not even that people are denying the things happen. We've even said we're not denying that
Right. We don't know.
any of these violent assaults happen, but you're clearly not being forthcoming with your quote unquote evidence that this was used as a Hamas command center, even as the Post was investigating. And I'm sure the Post made pretty clear to the IDF contacts that they had that, hey, we're not really sold on this. Do you want to produce some more evidence so that if what you say is true, we can print that? He said, I don't have any information to give you at this time. So even when they were saying this is a Hamas command center at Al-Shifa hospital, my inclination was to think it's likely not, because we've seen doctors who have worked there for 16 years say, no,
of course,
I've not seen any evidence of this at all. What I came
These
out and
scumbags
said,
are smearing Doctors Without Borders.
Exactly. They're smearing Doctors Without Borders. They're attacking Doctors Without Borders trucks. We did a segment on that a few weeks back, right? But my point at the time was, even if this is being used as a command center, that does not excuse laying siege upon the whole hospital. Put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say a domestic terrorist outfit had shacked up at an American hospital. Would we, as an American people, accept our government just dropping bombs on the hospital, setting snipers outside to shoot anything that moved inside the hospital? We'd say, no, are you crazy? Most of the people in the hospital, even if this is being used as a militant operation by a terrorist outfit, most of the people in there are innocent civilians, and so you can't just kill everything that moves in the hospital. We as Americans would never tolerate that kind of treatment of our own people. And people point to Waco as an example. Yeah, Waco, first of all, the government caught a lot of hell for Waco. Second, Waco happened after a 50-day standoff. You can just go in all at once immediately and shoot everything that moved or blow it up. So that's what we were saying. So we weren't denying it. But now it seems like there's good reason to think that they were full of shit from the outset, which was always our first inclination. And what an obscenity. I mean, it's an obscenity either way. But now that you have the Washington Post saying we found no evidence to back the IDF's claims that this was a command center, the hell that you unleashed upon those poor people in that building, patients, doctors, babies, I mean, that is just beyond unconscionable. This whole thing is beyond unconscionable. It sounds stupid to say. We've been saying the same thing for almost 3 months now. But this is, as they write, a watershed moment in that respect, that now you have a paper of record coming out with a thoroughly sourced and vetted report saying, we don't believe this. We don't believe this. And if they didn't feel confident in that assessment, they wouldn't have printed it. They'd have waited for more information. They realized at a certain point they were being stonewalled. They weren't going to ever see this other evidence that supposedly exists, and so they had to print what they had. And good on them for printing it.
Yeah, this always had a WMD's vibe about it. When you looked at the kind of evidence they presented and the holes in that evidence, it always felt like a snow job. There's no denying at that point that this war is genocidal. Why would you attack hospitals under a pretense if you're not just trying to sow terror and death among the population? That's the only reason you would do that, when it is not, as revealed in this article, a command post. And they are continuing to attack hospitals under this premise. They're attacking churches. They're attacking mosques. What if Vladimir Putin did this? What would we be saying about it?
Well, that's why it's important. Sorry, go ahead.
This monster, this bloody genocidal monster, we would very quickly call it genocide if any nation we were not propping up did something like this. I mean, it's amazing. It's this world historical atrocity being committed by an ally in broad daylight. And it's unmasking a lot of people, and it is revealing the ugly truth of America in ways that Donald Trump, who they fret so much about, never even dreamed of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's well said. And the only thing I would add to that is that at the end of the piece that I just read there, I only read the first third of that article. It's pretty long. I encourage everyone to read it. They said, that they were attacking other hospitals now, and perhaps that's why they were compelled to run that story now, because it's important to have this on record, so that you can assess other attacks on future hospitals with the same kind of skepticism that you should have brought to this case.
But it's also terrifying that, as far as we can tell, Israel doesn't even give a shit.
No.
They don't even care, man. They don't care what they reveal. They're just going to keep doing what they're doing.
Why would they care when we have their back? We won't even let them convene a summit to determine Geneva Convention's violations.
Please clap.